Good morning. I am very honored to be at this summit of women judges and prosecutors on human trafficking and organized crime to discuss one of the most disturbing and inhuman treatments in the 21st century. Let me first and foremost welcome my sister judges across the world who have taken out time out of their busy schedule to discuss this burning issue of human trafficking. I must also appreciate the organizers of this summit. I say well done. I'll be speaking especially on human trafficking in Nigeria and the modalities put in place to checkmate this crime. Human trafficking, no doubt, has a number of far-reaching socio-economic, health, political consequences in any given country, and Nigeria is definitely not an exception. In Nigeria, several factors have been seen to be responsible for this unfortunate act. Amongst them is poverty, unemployment, ignorance, and family size, thereby making people to be victims. Statistics have placed it that women and children are the most vulnerable. Nigerian women account for 70% of those trafficked to Italy alone. Although more than 90% of the girls and women trafficked from Nigeria are believed to come from the southern part of the country, with Edo State leading with 90%, followed by Delta with 5%, and the rest of the country trailing with 5%. Human trafficking in the northern part of the country is believed to be growing. Apart from the economic factor, there are some people who believe that the trafficking of women in the third world, in countries like Nigeria, because women are held in low esteem and consequently manipulated and controlled by a male-dominated society. It is my sincere belief that if women were empowered by the male-dominated society, it will be hard to traffic them. Trafficking on women and children for exploitative purposes in Nigeria can be viewed from two perspectives. There are the internal and the external. Internally, children are procured as domestic workers, while external trafficking provides girls and women for prostitution. Unsuspecting young girls and women have fallen prey to traffickers who use them also for rituals. As stated earlier, poverty is a major cause of this dehumanizing treatment because, as seen in most poor homes, parents can barely meet the legitimate needs of their children. The financial stress on them makes them vulnerable to the deceit of these traffickers, who promise their children juicy and supposedly rewarding jobs, only to cajole them into prostitution and forced labor abroad. Another major reason is conflict. The World Bank has showed that more than 1.5 billion people live in countries affected by violent conflict. Conflict, therefore, is a push factor for trafficking. In Nigeria, prone conflict zone, Boko Haram trafficked children and used them as soldiers and militias. These young girls are kidnapped, they are sold into slavery, they are forced into marriage. Boko Haram recruits them and uses them as soldiers for children that are as young as 12 years. They abduct women and girls in the northern region of Nigeria. Some of them are subjected to domestic servitude. Some of them are taken into forced labor, sex slavery, through forced marriages to these militants. The former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, openly decried the practice of trafficking in women when he said, and I quote, "All over the world, our women are seen hawking themselves for a fee to the highest bidder like commodities. For us, who have seen this disgraceful way that our children are sold into slavery and prostitution, anything that can be done will be done to restore the dignity of Nigerian womanhood," unquote. In order to curtail this menace, the federal government of Nigeria established the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, in August 2003, by virtue of the Trafficking in Persons Prohibition, Enforcement and Administration Act 2003, to investigate, prosecute, and punish all offenders against the law of human trafficking in Nigeria. This law has now formally criminalized human trafficking. In March 2015, the Trafficking in Persons Prohibition, Enforcement and Administration Act 2015 repealed the previous law. The new law now primarily intends to reflect recent developments in trafficking that were not included under the previous law. For instance, it ensures that the penalties for breaching the provisions of the law are consistent with the spirit of trafficking protocol. Indeed, the penalties given for offenders listed under the 2003 Act were severely inadequate for the purposes of dissuasion and deterrence. The 2015 law increased the penalties for trafficking offenders. It prescribes a minimum penalty of 5 years imprisonment and a minimum fine of 1 million naira for labor trafficking offenses. The law prescribes a minimum penalty of 5 years imprisonment and a minimum fine of 1 million naira for sex trafficking offenses. The minimum penalty increases to 7 years imprisonment if the case involves a child. According to its mission statement, NAPTIP is committed to the prevention of all forms of human degradation and exploitation through the coordinated use of Nigerian crime prevention and law enforcement resources. The organization took out the functions of the Special Task Force in Human Trafficking and was vested with responsibilities to enforce law against traffic in persons and to take charge and coordinate the rehabilitation and counseling of trafficked persons and other related matters. The agency prosecuted and convicted many in Edo State, Ogun State. There are also multiple cases pending that raise public awareness. NAPTIP is also collaborating with the Nigerian Immigration, the Nigerian Police, and non-governmental agencies that has established offices across the country. Another law that helps in checkmating this menace is the Child Rights Act. This act sets out the rights and responsibilities of a child in Nigeria and provides for a system of child justice administration and the care and supervision of a child, amongst other things. The Child Rights Act was passed in 2003 and has been adopted in many states in Nigeria. The Child Rights Act was adopted with the intention of domesticating the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The legislation made a very wide provision for certain rights of children with respect to trafficking, forced labor, and other harmful practices to children. The law creates offenses and relevant punishments for each. The penalty for such an offense on conviction is a fine of 500,000 or imprisonment for a term of 5 years, or both. There are equally criminal law enactments made, such as the Penal Code and the Criminal Code. Section 279 of the Penal Code provides, and I quote, that whoever imports, exports, removes, buys, sells, disposes, traffics, or deals in any person as a slave, or accepts, receives, or detains in any person against his will as a slave shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 14 years and shall also be liable to a fine. Lastly, Nigeria entered into bilateral agreements with countries in Africa having the same challenges. The African Union adopted the Ouagadougou Action Plan to combat trafficking in human beings, especially women and children. The action plan reinforced international instruments on human trafficking and encourages the African states to adopt legislative, administrative, and institutional measures to combat trafficking in human beings. Additionally, it took sub-regional initiatives to combat human trafficking, such as the ECOWAS Initial Plan of Action against trafficking in persons. There have been serious awareness campaign by the Nigerian Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons to deter persons from such criminal acts, which has drastically reduced the crime. The Nigerian government is aware and acknowledges the menace of human trafficking. They are on top of dealing with the issue, although we are not yet there. Thank you for your time.